What's up, guys, and welcome to my first MMA video I've done in a long time that isn't in EA UFC or 3 or 4. And I'm happy to be back talking about mixed martial arts, and I hope that I'll have plenty of reason to talk about the sport going forward, because I'm not going to lie to you guys, I've been a little bit uninterested in the sport for a little while now. It's just kind of taken a downward spiral, in my opinion, in terms of how interesting it actually is with a lot of different reasons. But we're going to go ahead and talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov and whether or not he is the greatest of all time. But before I do that, I want to give the man credit where credit is due and congratulate him on an incredible career. I mean, he's been one of the best fighters in the world. He's been one of the best fighters of all time. Throughout his entire career, he's only lost one round, and that's kind of debatable, I guess you could say. So I mean, he's just been class throughout his entire career. There's no doubt about that. So congratulations to him. Congratulations and all the best for his future, and enjoy retirement, even though you're definitely not watching this. But if you are, I mean, congratulations. Now let's go ahead and talk about the topic at hand. We have obviously whether or not he is the greatest of all time. Before we talk about the greatest of all time in general, let's talk about lightweight. Because I do believe that's more realistic, and you can probably understand where I'm going with this based on what I just said. But I feel like at lightweight, it's really difficult to find anybody who deserves it more than him. I mean, let's see, like, there's Benson Henderson, definitely not. Anthony Pettis has been exposed in brutal fashion. He's had some sensational performances, but definitely not greatest of all time levels. Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor. I mean, we're talking about like guys that have done some good things in the sport, but they are not GOAT contenders. I guess you could say maybe Conor, if he goes on to do some crazy shit, like go on an insane run, then maybe, because there is the asterisk of him definitely being coked out of his mind during that fight. But realistically, I'm going to go with Khabib definitely being the greatest lightweight of all time. I don't really see how you can debate that. The only guy that really gives him a run for his money is El Cucuy. They obviously never fought. Now, he doesn't have an undefeated record, but that doesn't necessarily, I think, ruin your chances of being the greatest of all time, because if you avenge your loss, I kind of put that out of the way. And he has all the time in the world to avenge his loss to Justin Gaethje. So and of course he's grown so much before his previous loss. So it's not even the same fighter, to be honest with you. So definitely Tony Ferguson is the only guy who can really give him a run for his money. Other than that, in my opinion, at this moment in time, there's really nobody. But yeah, that's the situation at lightweight. I do believe he is the greatest of all time. I would really love to see him take on Tony Ferguson sometime down the line, just to really see what happens when he's against an elite level scrambler. Because Justin Gaethje, his jiu-jitsu was awful. It was just embarrassing, honestly. He wasn't even able to stop a single takedown, realistically. I mean, there was one where Khabib just completely mistimed it and misplaced it, but realistically, as soon as he grabbed Gaethje, it was completely over. Even in the first round, Gaethje was extremely fortunate that the round ended, because once he got to the ground, it was just embarrassing how fast he got through. I mean, people talk about Conor McGregor, but motherfucker, Conor McGregor is light years better than Gaethje when it comes to stopping takedowns, and light years with his defense. I mean, on the ground, it was just insane. Like he didn't get submitted until he got completely tired out, and I mean, he even got clipped. You know what I mean? And he still did a million times better job than Justin Gaethje. So let's slow our roll when it comes to the Conor McGregor criticism in terms of his ground game. Anyway, let's move on to the greatest of all time status. For me personally, he's not even close. That's the reality. Obviously he's undefeated, 29-0, incredible numbers, but up until his fight against Rafael dos Anjos, he essentially fought nobody. I mean, unless you want to consider Thiago Tavares, Gleison Tibau, and Abel Trujillo like really tough opponents, you're talking about him not really facing somebody, of elite level until he fought Rafael dos Anjos in 2014. So, in my opinion, just based on his resume alone, no, you can't. Because before that, he fought a shit ton of bums. No disrespect, but he fought a bunch of guys that realistically are nowhere near his level. I mean, it's just not even close. So, once he got to taking on Rafael dos Anjos, who he beat by unanimous decision, one of the most dominant performances, I would say, of his career, because he beat down a guy who was known for that kind of, is known for that kind of performance. So, incredible stuff for him. Then he went and he beat Darrell Horcher. It was a short notice fight. It wasn't Khabib's fault that he fought the guy, but there was no doubt in anybody's mind how that was going to go. Then he beat Michael Johnson, who he submitted in the third round. I mean, Michael Johnson, he's a good striker, but only in boxing range, and realistically, he was never going to win that fight. I don't think anybody's going to argue that Michael Johnson is a crazy good fighter. Edson Barboza is a monstrous striker, but he showed that in his he's definitely not top level. I mean, he's amazing as a striker, but he was never going to beat Khabib, but that's still a hell of a win. Al Iaquinta, come on, guys. Conor McGregor is a great win. Dustin Poirier is a great win. And Justin Gaethje is a great win. But when you look at what he's done, I don't really know if you can say that's enough to be the greatest of all time. Because in order to reach that status, you have to surpass Jon Jones. You have to surpass George St. Pierre. You have to surpass Daniel Cormier. You have to surpass Anderson Silva. I mean, we're talking about insanely good fighters here. And I don't really know if that's quite frankly acceptable. Jon Jones has been on a tirade on the internet, and I have to say I agree with him 100% that 15 fucking title defenses. He's cleaned out the light heavyweight division, and it's a shallow division. But when he came into it, he was a young up and coming prospect who was only 30. No, I'm just kidding. He wasn't. He was an actual young and up and coming prospect. And he wiped out the entire division, 2-3 generations of the division, to be honest with you. And he still has a lot to do in his career. He's not going to be retiring anytime soon, not seriously anyway. And I think if he does go up to heavyweight, he can really do a lot of damage there. So I feel like what he has done, and he's also undefeated. That loss to Mark Hamill, Matt Hamill. Oof. All right, he's Mark Hamill or Matt Hamill. Fuck, I think it's Matt Hamill. I don't want to make a mistake, and it's not the Joker. I'm having a blank. I think it's Matt Hamill, the Hammer. That's not a loss. That's not a loss. So they're both undefeated. The difference is Khabib defended his title 4 times. Jon Jones did it 15 times. He's been fighting in title fights for well over a decade at this point. I mean, the guy was in the UFC 9 months after he started training mixed martial arts. The guy is just insanely good. I would say that the GOAT is either Jon Jones or GSP. After that, you could argue, I think, 3 people realistically. It is DC, because DC has only lost to all-time greats. He's only lost to the greatest fighter of all time, in my opinion, and the greatest heavyweight of all time. Those are the only 2 people that have really been anywhere near beating Daniel Cormier. Gustafsson gave him a decent fight, but realistically, DC has been extremely dominant throughout his entire career, except for against elite-level fighters, which, by the way, he beat Stipe at least once. And he was doing a really, really good job in that second fight. I mean, Stipe hit him with a body shot, but before that, DC was looking like he was going to win the fight. So I apologize. My cats are having a fucking time right now. They're going to war. Definitely putting up a better fight than Justin Gaethje. No offense to Gaethje, but, I mean, come on now. Like, these are elite-level guys who consistently fought the best in the world. So I do believe I would probably put DC above Khabib just because he did it for such a long time, and he was in a lot of title fights against some really, really high-level guys, and I mean, he won titles in 2 different weight classes. So I definitely believe that DC is, if not above him, at least on par with him. So the question is, where do you put Anderson Silva? It's hard to say. Like, for me, it's Jon Jones, GSP, Anderson Silva, DC, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's how I see it. Because Stipe is the best heavyweight of all time, but is he necessarily the greatest? I don't know if he's really in the conversation right there. Because DC was so dominant for such a long time. And like I said, the only people that have beat him were all-time greats. Stipe, the only person that he hasn't eventually lost to is against Stefan Struve. And I don't think anybody wants to put that damage on Stefan Struve right now. It would be completely uncalled for. But I just feel like Khabib, what he's done is incredible, but he didn't do it for long enough. You know what I mean? That is a factor. Anderson Silva defended his title for a long-ass time. He had the record. GSP defended a bunch of times. He avenged his loss to Matt Hughes. He did insane shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, amazing fighter. And GSP went up to middleweight and he beat the champion. Of course, it was Michael Bisping, so not exactly the best middleweight in the world. Even though he was the champion, nobody's gonna argue Michael Bisping is an all-time great himself. But he still beat the champion, and he beat him by finishing him in arguably one of his most fun fights in his entire career. So for me, it is Jon Jones, GSP, Anderson Silva, Daniel Cormier, and Khabib Nurmagomedov, and then maybe have Stipe down there too. It's definitely debatable once you get to 6, because then there's a bunch of guys who were from the previous generations that definitely deserve to be thrown in there as well. So that's my opinion. Khabib, amazing fighter, all-time great, not the greatest of all time though. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, he's not that. He didn't do it for long enough. He only beat, like, realistically, Edson Barboza, top 5, not always, but has been top 5. Conor McGregor, definitely. Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. So you're talking about 4 top 5 fighters, top 10, definitely, you know, he's definitely beaten some, like, 6, maybe top 10 fighters, but that's not crazy. Jon Jones cleared out the entire division. He cleared out an entire generation, as well as his, so 2 generations, as well as beating the best opposition that they could give him from the current generation. Obviously debatable for Dominic Reyes, but he does have the win on his record. So I don't think that's really debatable. The question is GSP or Jon Jones. That's the debate, or Anderson Silva. Those 3 are the debate. I would say that Anderson Silva's had such a drop-off now. I mean, you can say maybe in his peak, Anderson Silva was the greatest of all time, but I think for their career, I have to go with Jon Jones and then GSP. It's really 1A or 1B. But Khabib, hell of a career, just not the best. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and let me know in the comment section down below your rankings for the greatest of all time and what do you really think about Khabib and his record, because that's kind of the that's just kind of the thing. Like, he beat a lot of cans, he beat a few elite level fighters, but just the longevity just wasn't really there. So let me know all these things in the comment section down below, guys, and I will see you in the next video, hopefully.